The new leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, Russell Finlay, has faced John Swinney in First Minister's questions. So this is the leader of the opposition and the First Minister. So in terms of Scottish politics, this should be as good as it gets. It's also Russell Finlay's specialist area, justice. So let's see what they had to say.
Just weeks ago, the SNP released almost 500 prisoners early, before they had served their sentences. And in 98% of these cases, victims were not even told. The Government is now considering the early release of some of the most dangerous criminals in Scotland. And I'd like to ask, does John Swinney believe that this is the right thing to do?
Russell Finlay draws attention to informing victims. OK, that's a sort of side issue. But the fundamental issue is that it's unjust to let prisoners out who haven't completed their sentence that the judge regarded as a just sentence. Now, talking about the victims is a pretty underarm question, and Russell Finlay's effectively just invited John Swinney to give his side of the case.
Presiding Officer, I understand the seriousness of the issues that Mr Finlay puts to me today, and we have to address the rising prison population in a sustainable and effective way. The Government took measures which were explained fully to Parliament, and they only took place once we had parliamentary consent to the steps that we took. And my view fundamentally is that there is a difficulty about the rise in the prison population. The prison population this morning is sitting at 8,322. It's at a very high level, and ministers are concerned for the well-being of prison officer staff and for prisoners as a consequence of the level of congestion there is in our prisons. So we have to act, and the Cabinet Secretary will give a statement to Parliament this afternoon on these issues.
Now, of course, that's a classic Swinney answer, isn't it? It's all about process and procedures and sort of management speak. Completely avoids the fundamental issue because Russell Finlay isn't pressing him on the fundamental issue, which is justice.
John Swinney might be even softer in crime than Nicola Sturgeon. Victims groups feel that killers, rapists, domestic abusers, drug dealers and child abusers could be freed early. So does the First Minister personally believe they should be let out without any consideration of victims or public safety?
OK, talking about victims groups, that's sort of OK, trying to get some empathy. Talking about public safety, OK, but the fundamental difference, one would have expected a specialist in justice to know, is justice. But it's nowhere to be seen.
Here are some examples of recent sentences imposed by Scottish courts. 7 years for raping a 10-year-old girl, 9 years for stabbing a man to death, 5 years for sexually abusing 4 young boys. All of these criminals, and many, many others like them, could be let out early. People in the real world can't get their heads around criminals not serving the sentences that they are given.
OK, Russell Finlay's come up with some good examples there. I think most people's intuitions would say that those sentences seem too light, too lenient. But then Russell Finlay says people can't get their head around them. It's not about what people can get their head around. It's about a matter of justice. What is a just punishment for a particular crime? What does a certain wrongdoing deserve as punishment? But instead of going for that absolutely core question, Russell Finlay is going for a more populist, fluffy sort of approach.
It's not for me to question the sentencing policy that's independently decided by the judiciary. If I was to do that, Parliament would have... I would be breaching my constitutional role as First Minister, which has to respect, and it was part of the oath of office I took when I became First Minister, that I would respect the distinction between my responsibilities as the leader of an executive government and the independent role of the judiciary.
OK, I heard John Swinney say that, and I thought, that's not true. I'm no expert in this area, but I immediately thought, that's just not right. So I asked my friend ChatGPT for a quick comment on the matter. So, does the Scottish Government have influence over sentencing guidelines? ChatGPT said, yes. The Scottish Government had influence over sentencing guidelines, but it operates through several institutions and legal frameworks. For example, criminal justice is a devolved matter, meaning that the Scottish Parliament has the power to pass laws relating to sentencing. Recent legislative reforms, such as changes to community sentencing and custodial sentences, have been influenced by Scottish Government policies. Scottish Minister's role. The Scottish Government, through its Justice Secretary and Ministers, can propose changes to sentencing policy. In conclusion, while judges in Scotland are independent in their decision-making, the Scottish Government has significant influence through the legislative process, policy initiatives and the work of the Sentencing Council. That's what Russell Finlay should have come back with. So when John Swinney says, "There's nothing I can do about these sentences," that is not true. Now, John Swinney is right that he shouldn't comment on an individual judge's sentence in a particular case. But if they see one they think, right, that sentence is wrong, then the Scottish Government basically can change the rules so that a lenient sentence can't be given in the future for that crime, for example. But Russell Finlay doesn't come back on it. This is classic Scottish Parliament in action. They call it a debating chamber, but it's not a debating chamber. It's a recitation afternoon chamber. Because they're so well prepared, they're on their script, and so often that people don't respond to what's just been said. Russell Finlay should have been on that in a moment, saying, "John, that's not true. You're avoiding your responsibility. You can influence sentencing," in all these different ways. But I think instead, it was just staying on his script.
Scotland imprisons more offenders per head of population than most other European countries.
Now there, John Swinney is saying there's a lot of people sent to prison in Scotland, as though that's evidence that somehow or other the justice system in Scotland is sending too many people to prison. I mean, does the thought occur to John Swinney that maybe the crime rate's higher in Scotland? That's why the incarceration rate might be higher. But John Swinney seems to be presenting that fact as though it's evidence that our justice system is too tough. We need to lighten it up. It needs to be more lenient so we don't send as many people to prison, so our numbers are comparable to other European countries. It doesn't start with the key factor, which is how many crimes are committed in these different countries.
Over the last decade, the average length of prison sentences has increased by 32%. 32%. That statistic alone demonstrates that Russell Finlay is putting complete nonsense to me at First Minister's questions.
Now, I heard John Swinney say that the average sentence has gone up. I thought, what? That's strange. How could that have happened? Then I thought, I can see how that's happened. Because what the Scottish Government's done is they've introduced this presumption against short sentences. So basically, judges are really strongly encouraged not to give short jail sentences. So to try and illustrate what's gone on here, let's imagine in some fictitious justice system, a certain number of people were sent to prison. A third of them were sent to prison for 1 year. A third of them were sent to prison for 5 years. A third of them were sent to prison for 10 years. Now you can imagine what the average prison sentence would be. What would it be? Somewhere between, I don't know, 3 or 4 or whatever. That would be the average prison sentence. But then if you come along and say, all those people who were sent to prison for 1 year, they're not going to be sent to prison anymore. They're going to go and do the gardening in the local park or whatever, community sentence. And then what happens? That will mean that your average length of prison sentence goes up. Because instead of there being 1s, 5s and 10s, there's only 5s and 10s. So the average will go up to 7.5. So John Swinney's playing this as though, look, we've got tougher. Prison sentences have got longer. But no, what they've really done is eliminated some prison sentences completely, so people don't go to prison at all. So they've actually made the system more lenient, and John Swinney is presenting it as though they've toughened it up. And Russell Finlay misses this completely. He doesn't respond to that at all. As I say, this is the Scottish Parliament. That's what we expect.
98% of all those convicted of rape and attempted rape between 2019 and 2022 received a custodial sentence.
Now, John Swinney has got the figures at his fingertips for rape and attempted rape. Why is that? Because as far as the Scottish Government is concerned, and Police Scotland as well, rape is a feminist issue, so they've really got to hammer rapists, attempted rapists. There's going to be massive emphasis on that. They want to see tougher sentences. I've got no problem whatsoever with tough sentences for rapists, absolutely. No problem with that at all. But the fact that John Swinney goes to that as an example, it's not to show that he's actually tough on crime and really wants to see severe punishments. It's that part of the justice system has been influenced by the feminist emphasis of the Scottish Government. Rape and attempted rape, that's a crime the government really, really cares about. if someone just comes and punches you in the street or sets your house on fire or whatever, then not so much. That's not really so central to their agenda. So Russell Finlay, how did he do? I would say in terms of presence and his presentation, I would say it's sort of a bit flat. I mean, let's give him time. I'm sure he will improve. He didn't give me the impression, though, that it's someone who's been waiting years for the opportunity to get there, tie John Swinney in knots and really make an impact. It felt as if more he was a bit nervous about making a mistake. So instead of being quick thinking on his feet, it seemed like he was quite attached to his pre-prepared lines. Basically, as was John Swinney. But that's just normally what we get in the Scottish Parliament. So coming back to the central issue, what's the Scottish Family Party line on this fundamental issue? Well, justice. We've got to talk about justice. Wrongdoing deserves punishment. That's the fundamental principle. So what needs to be debated is a certain wrongdoing deserves what punishment, and we've got to sort that out by whatever means. But that was missing in this discussion. What certainly is not justice is for a judge to say, you're to go to prison for 10 years, and then they let you out after 5 in any case. That's just routine. But then they say, we're actually going to let you out even earlier because we're full. No conception of justice can include the concept that you're going to be sent to prison until it fills up, then we'll let you out. That it just makes a mockery of the justice system. If your prisons are full, then what you need to do, if you think your justice system is working properly and fairly and justly, and you've got too many prisoners, you've got to build more prisons. That's what you need to do. If you think the justice system is too tough, then okay, you can look at it from that way. But the justice system as it is what's been enacted by the Parliament, and so they need to build prisons or try and reduce crime in other ways. But you can't just let people out of prison like that. Our view of prison and alternatives to prison, I think the main problem with prison is it's full of criminals. So as far as a peer group influence, it's often not particularly positive, to say the least. And so we're very open to looking at alternatives to prison. I think that's a perfectly valid thing to do. But I think they need to match up with the public's intuition about what a fair punishment is. If the public looks on and sees the punishment given to an offender and they think, well, they've basically got away with it, then that's a problem. But if the punishment of whatever form matches up to the public's intuition, when the public genuinely understands what the punishment involves, the public needs to think, yeah, they got what's coming to them, that's fair, I'm happy. If the public's not happy, they become more and more irritated and unhappy, and people are more likely to try and take the law into their own hands, and criminals are not deterred adequately, etc., etc. So we need to return the concept of justice to the centre of discussions about justice in the Scottish Parliament. Right, I'm going to make another video very soon about women's prisons in Scotland. That's a very interesting area. I've already mentioned a bit about sort of maybe a bit of a feminist bias, but I'll talk about that in a future video. In the meantime, buy your tickets for the Scottish Family Party Conference on the 9th of November. It's just in the afternoon. There is a link below, and I would love to see you there. Come and say hello. Thanks for watching.